In the beginning, before anything existed, there was no light, no sound, no movement. Just emptiness. No mountains, no seas, no stars, no living beings. It was a deep and mysterious silence, a total darkness that enveloped everything. Imagine for a moment a vast expanse where nothing could be seen but endless emptiness. That was the state of the earth, formless, lifeless, purposeless. A dark and chaotic abyss. But at that moment, something great was about to happen. The Creator of all, Almighty God, was present. He was not limited by this emptiness. In fact, he was about to transform everything with his word. His power is so great that with a simple command, he could bring the entire universe into being. The Spirit of God moved over the waters that covered the earth, like a gentle breeze before a great storm. This movement was the first sign that something spectacular was about to happen. It was as if God was about to begin sculpting a masterpiece, molding and organizing what was previously disordered and empty. The earth in that initial phase was like a blank canvas, ready to be filled with the wonders that God was about to create. The deep waters covered everything, but nothing yet moved. The stage was set, and the Creator in his majesty was about to give the first order. And then, God began his creative work, giving form to that which had no form, bringing life where before there was only an abyss. The stage was set, and creation was about to begin. This is the origin of everything. A story of beginning, where the absolute power of God begins to act. So, let's go to the video. But first, just check if you are already subscribed to the channel, so you don't miss the next videos, bringing narratives, history and biblical accounts that you do not yet know. In the midst of that immense void and darkness, something extraordinary was about to happen. Imagine for a moment, until now, there had been no light, nothing that could be seen. Only infinite darkness, deep and silent. But God, with his infinite wisdom and power, was about to break this silence in a most impressive way. Then, with a firm, powerful and authoritative voice, God spoke for the first time, "Let there be light." Just these simple and direct words echoed throughout the newly formed universe. And the moment God spoke, something unimaginable happened. Where before there had been only darkness, light shone for the first time, breaking through the darkness in a glorious way. It was as if the universe itself had awakened to life. This light was unlike any other light we know. It was pure, strong and brilliant, bringing clarity to what had previously been only confusion. For the first time, creation began to take shape under this divine light. God, in his perfection, looked upon this light and saw that it was good. It was perfect. There was no flaw or error in what he had created. But the work was not yet complete. God, in his wisdom, separated light from darkness. He defined a clear boundary between day and night, establishing an order that would remain throughout creation. Light, which had previously been just a concept, now had a name, day. And darkness, which was also part of God's plan, was given the name night. Thus, the cycle of time began. The first day in the history of the universe was marked by this division: day and night, light and darkness, each with its place and purpose. And so, at the end of the first day, God took the first step toward shaping creation. On the second day of creation, something amazing was about to happen. The scene was still chaotic, with the earth covered by deep waters, without order or form. Everything was immersed in a great ocean without limits, where there was no division between what was above and what was below. It was as if everything was mixed together, with no defined space for anything. But God, with his wisdom and power, knew exactly what should be done. So, with his powerful word, God ordered a great separation. He created the firmament, something that you can imagine as an immense expanse or space in the middle of the waters. This firmament, which we know today as the sky, was what separated the waters that were below from the waters that were above. It is curious to think about this. Imagine a vast ocean of waters, and then God, with just one command, creates this space between them. The waters below remained covering the earth, and the waters above were raised, forming the clouds and what we see today as the atmosphere. This firmament that God created was not just a void. It was the space that allowed for future life, the space where the sun would shine, the clouds would float, and the wind would blow. And God, seeing this great separation, called the firmament heaven. These heavens, which we know so well today, are the place where we look to see blue during the day and stars at night. But at that moment, there was still no sun, moon, or stars. The sky was a great and perfect work of God's creation, waiting for what was to come. So with the creation of the firmament, the second day was completed. God, in his infinite wisdom, was arranging every detail to perfection. The universe that had been chaos was now beginning to take shape and order as each element found its place. The second day was a day of separation, of organization, and of preparation for the wonders that God was yet to create. On the third day of creation, the scene was still dominated by waters that covered the entire surface of the earth. Until that moment, there had been only water everywhere, a vast, boundless ocean beneath the sky that God had created the day before. But God, in His infinite wisdom, already had a wonderful plan. The universe was being precisely shaped, and now it was time for something great to emerge from those deep waters. Then, with His powerful voice, God commanded, "Let the waters under the sky be gathered together into one place, and let dry land appear." And so it happened. Like a great wave receding, the waters began to move, obeying God's command. Little by little, dry land began to appear, emerging from the depths as a new landscape to be filled with life. It was an incredible moment, when the chaos of the waters gave way to a world of order, of continents, mountains, and valleys appearing for the first time. God, observing this new creation, called the dry land earth, and the gathered waters He gave the name seas. These seas were vast and powerful, but now they had defined boundaries. The earth, once hidden beneath the waters, was now visible, ready to be filled with life and beauty. But God did not stop there. In His plan of perfection, He knew that something fundamental was still missing. The newly created earth was dry and barren, devoid of life. And so, God commanded something amazing, that all vegetation should spring forth from it. Imagine for a moment the scene. The earth, which until then had been empty and colorless, began to fill with life. Suddenly, grasses began to grow, covering the ground like a green carpet. Majestic trees began to sprout and stand tall, their leaves opening to the sky, absorbing the light that God had created on the first day. And these were not just ordinary trees. There were fruit trees of all kinds, laden with beautiful and tasty fruit. Each plant, each tree, had its own seed, which would ensure that life would continue to multiply. The vegetation, with its vibrant colors and varied shapes, transformed the earth's landscape, giving the new world an indescribable beauty. Tall trees swayed in the wind, flowers of all colors spread across the fields, and the air was filled with freshness and life. Everything was in perfect harmony. God, upon seeing His work on that third day, contemplated with satisfaction the earth covered in green, the seas with their gentle waves, and the creation now ready to receive the next wonders. The earth, previously dry and empty, was now full of life, ready to sustain all the creatures that God would still create. Thus, the third day was completed, a day of transformation, where the emptiness of the earth gave way to beauty, abundance, and the continuous cycle of life that began to flourish. So, did you already know this story of the creation of the world? Tell us in the comments what you think of the video. On the fourth day of creation, the earth was already full of life and vegetation, with the seas and dry land taking their rightful place. However, something was still missing. Although there had been light since the first day, the separation between day and night was not complete. Creation still needed something to bring order to time, to mark the days, seasons, and years. So God, in His infinite wisdom, decided to create the great heavenly lights. And with a simple command, the universe witnessed something extraordinary. God made the sun, a giant of fire and light, to illuminate and rule the day. The sun, with its intense and warm light, was placed in exactly the right position so that the earth could receive its light and heat in the right measure. It would not only bring daylight, but would also be responsible for warming the earth and giving energy to life. The sun now shone in the firmament, marking the beginning of each new day. But God did not stop there. He knew that the darkness of night also needed its own light, something that would bring a soft, soothing glow. And so, He created the moon. Majestic and serene, the moon was designated to rule the night. It was not as bright a light as the sun, but its presence brought a sense of peace to the night sky. With its silvery glow, the moon would mark the rhythm of the tides and the cycle of the seasons, becoming a faithful companion to the earth on dark nights. And then, to complete this magnificent work, God created the stars. Imagine the night sky, which was once just a vast darkness, now filled with countless bright stars. They spread across the sky, like tiny points of sparkling light, bringing beauty and wonder to the night. Each star was carefully placed in its place, forming constellations and adorning the sky with a spectacle that would never be repeated in the same way. The stars, in addition to their beauty, would serve as guides, helping humanity navigate and orient itself in the vastness of the earth. These heavenly lights were not only created to provide light, but also to mark time. The sun, moon, and stars would divide the days and nights, and help establish the seasons, months, and years. God, in his perfection, had created a cosmic clock, with each of these heavenly bodies playing a key role in the harmony of creation. By the end of the fourth day, Earth's sky was complete, with the sun shining during the day and the moon and stars casting their soft glow during the night. Creation was becoming more and more beautiful and orderly, with each element in its right place, working in perfect synchrony. And God saw that it was all good. On the fifth day of creation, God looked out over the vast world he had formed. The earth was ready, with its mountains, valleys, and rivers. The seas and lakes sparkled under the newly created sun, and the blue sky stretched out over everything. But something was still missing. The life that had already begun to sprout in the form of plants and trees needed to be joined by other creatures capable of moving, breathing, and filling the world with sound and movement. So God decided to fill the seas, rivers, and lakes with life. Imagine that moment. The once calm and silent waters suddenly began to stir. With a single word, God created fish and all the creatures that live in the waters. From the tiny, colorful fish that swim in shallow streams to the great creatures of the deep ocean, all came into being at his command. Majestic whales began to move through the depths, schools of fish danced beneath the surface, and mollusks, crustaceans, and all manner of sea creatures spread throughout the seas. The vast blue expanse was now teeming with life. But it wasn't just the waters that God's creation was at work in. He also looked up to the sky and, with the same creative word, brought birds into existence. The clouds began to fill with color and movement as birds, in all shapes and sizes, took flight for the first time. Imagine the once empty skies now filled with birds of every kind, majestic eagles soaring above the mountains, tiny sparrows and swallows dancing in the air, and even the vibrant hummingbirds, with their swift wings, visiting flowers and vegetation. Each of these creatures had a purpose. Fish filled the rivers and seas, swimming freely in all directions, while birds graced the sky with their graceful flights and melodious songs. And God, seeing this multitude of life and beauty, blessed all these creatures. He said, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth." With this blessing, God not only created fish and birds, but also gave them the ability to reproduce, to continue living, and to fill the seas and skies with their offspring. It was a day of life and movement. The fifth day brought sound to the heavens, with the singing of birds, and vibration to the seas, with the incessant movement of fish. Each of these creatures, with their colors, shapes, and behaviors, made the world more alive, more vibrant, and full of diversity. And so the fifth day came to an end, with the sea and sky teeming with life, each creature playing its part, and God once again, seeing that everything he had made was good. By the sixth day of creation, the scene was nearly complete. The skies were filled with birds, the seas teemed with life, and the earth was covered with rich, vibrant vegetation. But there was still something important to do. The dry land, though already beautiful, needed movement. It needed life that could walk on it, interact with the soil, the trees, and the rivers. And so God, in his wisdom and perfection, decided to create land animals. With a single word, God brought into existence all manner of creatures that would live and multiply on the earth. First, he created cattle, the great, powerful animals that would help mankind work and live. Imagine that moment. Cows, oxen, and sheep began to appear, walking on the newly created grass, filling the fields with their presence. These animals would not just be part of the landscape, but would become companions to man, providing sustenance and helping him cultivate the land. Then, God brought into existence reptiles. These intriguing creatures, of all shapes and sizes, began to crawl across the land. They ranged from tiny lizards to towering crocodiles that would inhabit the rivers and swamps. Each reptile was created with unique abilities to survive and thrive in different environments. They slithered silently through the vegetation, exploring the shadows and corners of God's creation. And so God continued to create all manner of wild animals. The fields, forests, and mountains were filled with majestic lions, ferocious tigers, imposing elephants, and small rodents that scurried along the ground. Wolves howled at dusk, while deer leaped gracefully through the valleys. Every animal, large and small, was part of a perfect balance, where each had its role, its purpose. The forests teemed with life, the plains vibrated with the sound of hooves, and the earth pulsed with energy. Every creature that God created, from the mightiest predators to the smallest insects that crawled on the ground, had its place. Everything was created in perfect harmony. There was so much variety: creatures that grazed, animals that hunted, and others that dug in the earth or ran freely through the fields. All of them were made to live in harmony with the environment that God had carefully prepared. God looked at his creation and saw that everything was good. The earth was now alive, not only with plants and trees, but with an incredible diversity of animal life. The forests were full of sounds, the roar of lions, the songs of birds, the rustling of small rodents, and the soft fluttering of insects' wings. This was the sixth day, a day marked by the creation of land animals, where God completed the harmony of the earth by filling its fields, mountains, and forests with abundant life. Everything was in perfect balance, each creature with its function, beauty, and purpose. And as God looked upon all that he had made, he once again saw that it was good. On the sixth day, after creating the land animals, something even greater was about to happen. Creation was already teeming with life. The seas teemed with fish and sea creatures, the skies were dominated by birds, and the earth was filled with wild and domestic animals. But God had a special plan. He wanted to create something in his image, a unique being who would reflect his nature and be capable of having a personal relationship with him. It was then that God decided to create the human being. And unlike the animals and plants, this creation would be intimate, personal. God bent down to the earth and with his own hands, molded Adam's body from the dust of the earth. Imagine that moment, the creator of the universe, in all his majesty, crouched before the soil he had created, shaping the first man. Every detail was sculpted to perfection. The eyes, the hands, the heart, every organ and muscle. God molded Adam with love and care, making him unlike anything he had created before. But Adam's body, although perfectly formed, was not yet alive. It was merely an inert structure, a body without a soul. Then something wonderful and unique in all creation happened. God, bending down over Adam, breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. This breath was not just ordinary air. It was the very essence of God, the life force that would give Adam the ability to think, feel, and most importantly, connect with the Creator. With this divine breath, God gave Adam something that no other being had, a soul. And in that instant, Adam became a living being. His eyes opened for the first time, his heart began to beat, and he breathed the pure air of Eden. He was not just a physical body, but a complete being, with body, soul, and spirit, reflecting the image of God. Adam opened his eyes to the world around him, and what he saw was a perfect creation, full of beauty and harmony. The Garden of Eden, with its fruitful trees, crystal-clear rivers, and the animals that God had just created, stretched out before him. It was all a gift to him, an environment where he would live, work, and above all, walk with God in perfect communion. Adam was different from all other creatures. He was not like the animals, who lived by instinct. He had the ability to reason, to make decisions, and to choose. But above all, Adam was created to have a relationship with God. He could talk to the Creator, understand his will, and live in obedience and love. And so, on that sixth day, God completed his masterpiece, the human being. Adam was the crowning glory of all creation. He was not just another creature, he was the reflection of the Creator, endowed with life and purpose. God, when he looked at all that he had made, saw that it was very good. With Adam, creation was complete, and the world was ready for God's great plan for humanity. Well, we're going to the end of the video, but before that I noticed that you still haven't liked this video. This is very important for YouTube to continue promoting our videos for you. So leave your like now, it's free, okay? Continuing. At the heart of God's perfect creation was a special place, a true paradise on earth. This place was the Garden of Eden, a place that reflected the beauty, harmony, and perfection of the Creator himself. God carefully planted the garden in the east, a space full of life, color, and peace, where everything grew abundantly and effortlessly. There, creation reached its peak, lush trees, crystal-clear rivers, and animals living in perfect harmony. When God created Adam, he placed him in this wonderful garden, not only to live in it, but also to care for it. Adam had one purpose, to be the caretaker of Eden. Imagine, for a moment, the life he had. Every morning, he woke up in the middle of a paradise, surrounded by indescribable beauty. The gentle breeze blew through the trees, carrying the scent of the flowers and the coolness of the waters. Adam could walk freely, explore, and touch every plant and tree that God had made grow. There was no tiredness, pain, or death. It was a place where life flourished in every direction. In Eden, there were all sorts of trees. God made fruit trees of all kinds grow, with delicious and abundant fruit. Each one was an expression of God's goodness, ready to feed and delight Adam. He could pick the most succulent fruits, walk in the shade of the trees, and drink from the clear water that flowed through the rivers. Everything in Eden was there to provide a full and happy life. But among all the trees in the garden, two stood out: the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The first, the tree of life, was a symbol of eternity, representing the continuity of life in its purest and most complete form. Adam had access to this tree, and it was there to sustain his immortal life. So, did you already know the story of the creation of the world? Tell us in the comments what you think, and tell us which stage you are following us from and the part that has surprised you the most so far. The other tree, however, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, represented a choice. God had placed this tree in Eden to test Adam's obedience and trust. The garden was perfect, but this tree carried a specific commandment from God: not to eat its fruit. By placing this tree in the middle of the garden, God offered Adam the freedom to choose between obeying or disobeying. Although Eden was a place of peace and abundance, it was also a place of responsibility. Looking at Eden, it was impossible not to see God's generosity and goodness. He had given Adam everything he needed to live a happy life in perfect communion with his Creator. But along with this blessing also came respect for God's will. Eden was a place of indescribable beauty, but also of choices and consequences. So, are you enjoying the video? Leave a comment. Tell us what you learned from this story, and how this story can help us in our lives. Enjoy and leave a like. And so Adam lived there, tending the garden, walking alongside God, and enjoying each day in this paradise. Every tree, plant, and river in Eden was a reminder of God's love, and Adam knew that the garden was a divine gift, full of purpose and meaning. The Garden of Eden was not just a physical place, but a symbol of everything God intended for humanity: life, fulfillment, and a close relationship with Him. It was a place where heaven and earth met, and where man, made in the image of God, lived in perfect harmony with creation and with the Creator. In the perfect paradise of the Garden of Eden, where God's creation was abundant and everything was in perfect harmony, God not only gave Adam the responsibility of caring for the land, but He also gave him a clear command. A command that would define the destiny of all humanity. Adam, with access to all the delicious fruits and magnificent trees, received a specific and very serious instruction from God. God spoke directly to Adam, saying, "Of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it you shall surely die." These words echoed in Adam's heart, marking the beginning of his journey of responsibility and obedience. Imagine the scene: the Creator, who had given life and form to everything, was offering Adam complete freedom. He could enjoy all the trees in the garden, except one. Each tree was laden with succulent fruit, the land was generous and fertile, and there was no want or lack. However, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was different. It represented something greater than a simple fruit. There on that tree was the test of Adam's trust and obedience to his Creator. This command from God, simple in its words, carried a profound truth: Adam's choice. He could live forever in paradise, in full communion with God, if he remained obedient. However, the commandment also carried a clear warning: disobedience would have serious consequences. God did not speak in vague or uncertain terms. He said that the day Adam ate of the forbidden fruit, he would surely die. Death until then was a concept that Adam had not known, for in Eden, life flourished everywhere. But here was the warning: disobedience would bring death. This commandment was not just a rule to be blindly followed. It was a reflection of the trust that God desired to have with man. The Lord was not taking away Adam's freedom, but rather offering him the chance to exercise his free will. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil symbolized the ability to choose between the path of obedience and the path of independence. But with this independence would come the weight of responsibility and, as God had warned, death. Adam understood that his role in Eden was not only to live and enjoy the fruits of the earth, but also to obey and trust in God's words. The garden was vast, full of gifts, and there was no need to approach that particular tree. He could live fully, without ever touching that fruit. By giving this command, God was not only setting a limit, but also demonstrating his desire for Adam to live in full communion with him, without the interference of evil. Adam had everything he needed to live in peace and eternal happiness. God's only request was that he trust in God's goodness and respect the commandment. The scene then was set: paradise was perfect, creation was complete, and Adam was living in perfect harmony with God. But God's command now loomed over him as a fundamental choice. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil remained, a silent presence in the garden, reminding Adam of his responsibility and the power of his decisions. In the splendor of the Garden of Eden, where everything God had created was good and perfect, something caught his attention: man was alone. Although Adam had all of creation around him, with the animals of the earth and the birds of the sky, he lacked a special companion, someone similar to himself, to accompany him on the journey of life. And it was at that moment that God, in his wisdom and compassion, decided that it was not good for man to be alone. God, the creator of all things, had a perfect plan. He wanted Adam to have a companion, someone who would be a suitable help, a complement to him. So God decided to perform a profound and miraculous act. He caused Adam to fall into a deep sleep, a sleep so peaceful and serene that Adam did not sense what was about to happen. While Adam slept, God removed one of his ribs. But what might have seemed like just a simple rib to human eyes, in God's hands, was the raw material for the creation of something magnificent. With that bone, God formed woman, a unique and special creation, made in the image and likeness of God, just as Adam was. But there was one crucial difference. She was not formed from the dust of the earth like Adam, but from the flesh and bones of the man himself, symbolizing the unity and deep connection that the two would have. When Adam awoke from his sleep, he saw before him Eve, the first woman, his companion. And when he saw her, his heart filled with joy. He immediately recognized her as a part of himself, someone who shared the same essence, but who was at the same time different and unique. With a sense of wonder and deep recognition, Adam uttered the words that would echo throughout eternity. "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh." These words were not just a physical observation, but a spiritual recognition of the union between man and woman. They were made for each other, in perfect harmony. Adam understood that Eve was not just another creature, but someone who was connected to him in a special way, someone with whom he could share life, love, work in the garden, and all the blessings that God had given. So, did you already know the story of the creation of the world? Tell us in the comments what you think, and tell us which state you are in. The creation of Eve marked the beginning of the first union, the basis of what we know today as marriage. God had created man and woman to live together, side by side, complementing and supporting each other. They were not complete alone, but together, they formed a perfect unit. And so, in the Garden of Perfection, the first family was formed. God looked at Adam and Eve, and saw that this union, like all of his creation, was very good. There was no loneliness, sadness, or lack. Now man had someone to share his life with, someone who would walk by his side, care for the garden with him, and most importantly, who would reflect, together with him, the image of God on earth. Eve, the woman, was a precious gift from God to Adam, a gift that symbolized love, companionship, and partnership. And so, in that perfect paradise, Adam and Eve lived in harmony, both made in the image of the Creator, destined to live in communion with God and with each other. It was the beginning of a journey that would mark all of humanity. At that moment, the Garden of Eden, already beautiful and complete, was now complete. Man and woman, united by the Creator, lived the perfection of divine creation, with everything at their disposal and in perfect communion with God. In the perfect paradise of the Garden of Eden, where life flowed in harmony and God's presence was constant, a subtle and cunning figure began to move in the shadows. The serpent, the most cunning of all the animals created by God, was devising a plan of deception and destruction. His goal? To sow doubt and disobedience in the heart of Eve and, by extension, Adam. The serpent approached Eve at a moment of vulnerability. With gentle, questioning words, he planted the seed of doubt. "Did God really say that you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" asked the serpent, his voice full of malice but disguised as innocence. Eve, unaware of the serpent's intentions, quickly responded, "We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree that is in the middle of the garden, God has said, 'You shall not eat of it, nor shall you touch it, or you will die.'" Here was the commandment that God had given to Adam, and which Adam had clearly shared with Eve. But the serpent, determined to twist God's words, struck his blow with precision. "You will not surely die," he said. "God knows that in the day you eat of it your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." These words sank deep into Eve's mind. Suddenly, the tree that had once been merely a symbol of obedience became something more. The serpent had awakened in her a dangerous curiosity, an irresistible temptation. The desire to be like God, to know good and evil, took over her thoughts. Eve looked at the tree of the knowledge of good and evil with new eyes. She saw that the fruit was pleasing to the eye, attractive, and that it looked delicious. More than that, it promised something that she had not considered until then: wisdom. The desire to possess this knowledge, to be like God, was too tempting. She reached out, picked the fruit, and ate it. The moment she tasted the fruit, something inside her changed. The weight of disobedience, although initially imperceptible, began to form. But Eve didn't stop there. She took more of the fruit and offered it to Adam, who was with her. Without hesitation, Adam also ate it. The divine order, the only commandment that God had given, was broken. Well, we are almost at the end of the video, but before that I noticed that you still haven't liked this video. This is very important for YouTube to continue promoting our videos for you, so leave your like now, it's free, okay? Continuing. The impact of this choice was immediate. Their eyes were indeed opened, but what they saw was not the divine wisdom that the serpent had promised. What was revealed before them was the reality of their nakedness, of their vulnerability. For the first time, they felt shame, something that had never existed in the perfect paradise that God had created for them. The purity and innocence that they had known were stained by disobedience. Adam and Eve, once in perfect harmony with God, now found themselves separated by guilt. They quickly sewed fig leaves together to cover their shame, trying desperately to hide what they had done. But the stain of sin was already there, and nothing they could do could undo that choice. The serpent, with his cunning, had gotten what he wanted. He had deceived them, leading them to disobey God and break their communion with the Creator. And now, the consequence of their disobedience would be inevitable. The scene that had once been one of harmony and perfection in the Garden of Eden had changed forever. Paradise, where there was no pain, shame, or fear, would now become the stage for a new reality, a reality in which sin and its consequences were present. This story is not just about the fruit or the serpent, but about the choice of Adam and Eve, and the consequences of that choice that would echo through all generations. After Adam and Eve gave in to temptation and ate the forbidden fruit, something changed dramatically. Their eyes were opened, but not in the glorious way the serpent had promised. Instead of divine enlightenment, what they experienced was a profound sense of shame and vulnerability. For the first time, they realized that they were naked. This previously unthinkable discovery now weighed upon them like a burden. The innocence they had once known was gone, and in its place, an uncomfortable sense of exposure took hold of their hearts. What had once been natural, the freedom to walk through the garden without fear or care, became a source of embarrassment. Adam and Eve, ashamed of their newfound nakedness, quickly sought a way to cover themselves. Without the necessary knowledge, they improvised garments from fig leaves. They sewed the leaves together in a desperate attempt to hide what they now considered shameful. It was a fragile and temporary solution, like the very nature of their mistake. Those garments could not undo what had been done, nor could they erase the reality of their disobedience. But what they did not realize was that their attempt to hide was not just from their own nakedness, but from something greater. They were trying to hide from God. The Creator, who had walked with them in the garden, would now become a presence they feared to face. They knew that what they had done could not be hidden by leaves or excuses. Guilt and shame had entered human history for the first time. And paradise, once full of harmony, now harbored a rupture, a break in the direct and pure relationship with God. This fall was not just a physical fall, but a spiritual fall, a fall that would transform the destiny of all creation. So what began as an act of disobedience unfolded into profound consequences. What would this new reality mean for them? How would God, who knew all things, react? Adam and Eve were about to discover that there was no escaping the truth, and that their actions would have consequences they could never have foreseen. And so, the history of humanity was changed forever. Adam and Eve's choice would affect not only their own lives, but all generations that would come after them. After the fall, the scene in the Garden of Eden was different. The atmosphere, which had once been filled with peace and harmony, now seemed charged with an unprecedented tension. Adam and Eve, their hearts heavy with guilt, tried to hide among the trees, as if that were possible. The voice of God echoed through the garden, calling to Adam, "Where are you?" It was a question that reverberated not only in the garden, but in the depths of Adam and Eve. Even though they knew they could not hide from God, they cowered in their shame. Finally, Adam responded, "I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid myself." This fear, a feeling they had never experienced before, revealed the profound impact of their disobedience. God, who knew all things, asked Adam a direct question. "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree of which I commanded you that you should not eat?" This was the direct confrontation. And instead of taking responsibility for his choice, Adam pointed to Eve. "The woman whom you gave to be with me, She gave me of the tree, and I ate. He not only blamed Eve, but in a sense, he questioned God himself for giving him the woman. So God turned to Eve. What is this that you have done? And like Adam, Eve shifted the blame. The serpent deceived me, and I ate. Her response also reflected the breach of trust and the attempt to escape responsibility. Okay, we are almost at the end of the video, but before that I noticed that you still haven't liked this video. This is very important for YouTube to continue promoting our videos to you, so leave your like now, it's free, okay? Continuing. In light of the confession of both, God pronounced judgment, starting with the serpent, the instigator of the fall. Because you have done this, you are cursed above all animals and above all beasts of the field. On your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life. The serpent, who had once seemed powerful and cunning, was condemned to crawl forever. Furthermore, God placed eternal enmity between the serpent and the woman, between the offspring of the serpent and the offspring of the woman, in a prophecy of future redemption. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. But the judgment did not stop there. God addressed Eve and declared, I will greatly multiply your pain in childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children. Childbirth, which could have been an experience of pure joy and fulfillment, would now be marked by suffering. In addition, Eve would face a new dynamic in her relationship with Adam, for God declared, Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. Finally, God spoke to Adam. Because of his disobedience in listening to his wife's voice and eating the forbidden fruit, the ground would be cursed because of him. In sorrow you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Work, which had once been an act of care and pleasure in the garden, would now be arduous. In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you shall return. Life, which was created to be eternal, would now be limited by death. The fate of all humanity was sealed at that moment. God's judgment was just, but it also carried a hidden promise. The enmity between the serpent and the woman's offspring pointed to a future hope, a descendant who would come to restore what had been lost. Adam and Eve received the consequences of their actions, but God's love would still be revealed throughout history, in the quest for the redemption of all creation. Paradise had been lost, but God's story with humanity was just beginning. Apos o julgamento de Deus, silencio tomu conta do jardim do Eden. O que antes era lugar de harmonia, onde a presença divina estava constantemente presente onde a Deo Eva viviam perfeita comunhão como Criador, agora esse tornava lugar de separação. A tristeza pareva no ar, como esse ada criação estivesse ciente de quebra do leco entre o homem e Deus. A Deo e Eva, vestidos com as túnicas de pele que o próprio Deus havia feito para cobrir sua nudez, esse preparavam para deixar o jardim. Suas mentes ainda estavam passadas com o peso de culpa e de vergonha, mas agora uma nova realidade os esperava. Eles teriam que enfrentar as consequências de sua desobediência. Deus sua infinita sabedoria e misericórdia, sabia que, se eles permanecessem no jardim, ainda teriam acesso à árvore de vida. Se comessem de seu fruto, viveriam para sempre seu estado de pecado, sem esperança de redenção. A morte paradoxalmente, agora era uma forma de misericórdia, uma forma de impedir que a humanidade ficasse presa para sempre na separação de Deus. Por isso, o Senhor tomou a decisão. Com uma mistura de justiça e compasão, ele expulsou a Deo e Eva do jardim do Eden. Foi a momento de dor, tanto para eles quanto para Deus. A criação que ele havia feito com tanto amor agora estava quebrada. E seus filhos estavam afastados de ele. No caminho de volta, a Deo olhou para trás, contemplando o jardim que agora se distanciava de sua visão. As árvores frondosas, o rio cristalino, os sem máculas, tudo o que antes lhe pertencia estava sendo deixado para trás. Mas o mais doloroso era deixar para trás a intimidade com Deus que havia desfrutado diariamente. Para garantir que a Deo Eva neo retornassem ao jardim, Deus colocou querubins à entrada do Eden. Poderosos seres celestiais, imponentes e resplandecentes, agora guardavam a entrada. Eles empunhavam uma espada flamejante que girava todas as dericos, bloqueando qualquer tentativa de retorno ao jardim. Era uma visão aterradora, mas caia de propósito. Aquela espada era símbolo de proteção, não apenas de santidade do jardim, mas também do pleno mar que Deus tinha para a humanidade. Adeo e Eva Kamanharam para o desconhecido, para uma terra agora marcada pelo trabalho arduo e pela dor. Cada passo que davam fora do jardim os afastava do perfeito, mas também os aproximava de uma nova história. Uma história que se desenrolaria ao longo dos séculos. Eles agora seriam os pais de toda a humanidade, e, mesmo fora do Eden, carregavam essa imagem de Deus. A espada flamejante, enquanto girava na entrada do jardim, também servia como lembrete. Havia algo mais, algo além de queda. A árvore de vida ainda estava lá, e o caminho para ela estava guardado, mas não para sempre. Deus sua graça, já tinha pleno de redem que o mandamento, pleno que traria de volta a possibilidade de vida eterna e de reconciliação. Adeo e Eva saíram do Eden, mas a promessa de uma redem que o futuro brilhava no horizonte distante. Embora expulsos, eles não estavam completamente abandonados. A história de Deus com a humanidade estava apenas começando. O Eden estava perdido, mas a esperança ainda vivia, guardada no coração de Deus. Obrigado por ti e assistido aqui. Não se esqueça de se inscrever e deixar seu like para continuar recebendo os próximos vídeos. Escreva nos comentários o que você entende dessa narrativa, e o que podemos tirar dessa história para nossa vida. After God's judgment, a silence fell over the Garden of Eden. What had once been a place of harmony, where the divine presence was constantly present and where Adam and Eve lived in perfect communion with the Creator, now became a place of separation. Sorrow hung in the air, as if even creation was aware of the breaking of the bond between man and God. Adam and Eve, dressed in the tunics of skin that God Himself had made to cover their nakedness, prepared to leave the garden. Their minds were still heavy with the weight of guilt and shame, but now a new reality awaited them. They would have to face the consequences of their disobedience. God, in His infinite wisdom and mercy, knew that if they remained in the garden, they would still have access to the tree of life. If they ate its fruit, they would live forever in their state of sin, with no hope of redemption. Death, paradoxically, was now a form of mercy, a way to keep humanity from being trapped forever in separation from God. So the Lord made His decision. With a mixture of justice and compassion, He expelled Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden. It was a painful moment for both them and God. The creation He had made with so much love was now broken, and His children were separated from Him. On the way back, Adam looked back at the garden that was now receding from his view. The lush trees, the crystal-clear river, the spotless sky, everything that had once belonged to him was being left behind. But the most painful thing was leaving behind the intimacy with God that he had enjoyed daily. To ensure that Adam and Eve would not return to the garden, God placed cherubim at the entrance to Eden. Powerful, resplendent celestial beings now guarded the entrance. They wielded a flaming sword that swung in all directions, blocking any attempt to return to the garden. It was a terrifying sight, but one filled with purpose. That sword was a symbol of protection, not only of the sanctity of the garden, but also of a greater plan that God had for humanity. Adam and Eve walked into the unknown, into a land now marked by toil and pain. Each step they took outside the garden took them further from perfection, but also brought them closer to a new story, one that would unfold over the centuries. They would now be the parents of all humanity, and even outside of Eden, they bore the image of God. The flaming sword, as it swung at the entrance to the garden, also served as a reminder. There was something more, something beyond the fall. The tree of life was still there, and the way to it was guarded, but not forever. God, in His grace, already had a plan of redemption in motion, a plan that would bring back the possibility of eternal life and reconciliation. Adam and Eve had left Eden, but the promise of a future redemption glimmered on the distant horizon. Though cast out, they were not completely abandoned. God's story with humanity was just beginning. Eden was lost, but hope still lived on, kept in God's heart. Thank you for watching this far. Don't forget to subscribe and like to continue receiving future videos. Write in the comments what you understood from this narrative, and what we can take from this story for our lives.